I can't think of any one day where we didn't support each other in some way, some small way.
And if somebody is falling down, then they put them on their back. And when they fall down, that person puts them on their back.
Here.
And that's that culture that I'm talking about.
Bonjour, bonjour, bonjour. I'm super duper excited today because I have two amazing founders who have an amazing story that of an event that just took place. But before we get into the questions and all the good stuff, let me set this up, if you please. Today is a special episode of Afternoon Tea, as I have Sarathy Naicker and Jason Smith, co-founders of Klue, an AI-powered competitive enablement platform designed to help product marketers collect, curate, and deliver actionable competitor insights to empower revenue teams to win more business. Sarathy is an experienced software professional with a deep background in data processing, security, and design. Prior to founding Klue, he played an important role with local tech firms ActiveState and Sofos. Meanwhile, Jason Smith is the co-founder, investor, and early employee of 5 startups, including acting as the former president of Vision Critical, a startup to 500 plus people, VP of Electric Arts, and co-founder of web applications pioneer, the Columbus Group, which was acquired by TELUS. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me today.
Happy to be here, Chris.
Fantastic. Well, let's talk about the big news. Before we get into the story, let's talk about the big news. Do one of you want to tell me what just happened and the big step of Klue's success?
I'll let Jason go because he was the one instrumental in making that happen.
Yeah, so Klue, we're happy to announce that we raised a $62 million US dollar Series B. Congrats. With Tiger Global leading it and Salesforce Ventures participating. So it's an exciting time to fuel up the rocket and see if we can take this further.
Oh, I love that. Well, here's a question, because most people who start off in the startup world, they think, hey, once I raise 2 million, I'm set. Well, you guys raised 62 million US. I mean, what do you do to celebrate that? And I'll ask you, Sarathy, what do you do to celebrate? How did you celebrate? And what's the next step? Like, is it raising more money? Do you start that right away? Or do you just realize, hey, we got the runway, let's go with it?
Yeah, celebrations are hard for me because internally I'm not a satisfied guy about anything. I'm never that satisfied. I'm like, we could do better. We could do this a little bit. This needs to be over here. It's not over there. Why is it not over there? So I'm a little, I don't know, in my internal brain, I'm a nitpicker, right? Jason is that way to some degree too, on different things, right? We are like that on different things. I don't sweat the small stuff on how your table looks, but the way the code looks, I sweat that a lot.
Fantastic.
Jason sweats the details on a whole bunch of different things so we're kind of complementing each other with that sort of mentality. But at the same time, we both realize that that's our natural state and that we need to celebrate the wins. Otherwise, you sap energy from everybody around you, right?
Completely.
You have to celebrate. And our way of celebrating is by calling out the people who made it happen and the people who have been with us through it all. And Jason and I, with our spouses, did take some time out, went for a nice dinner, and our spouses have been probably the single biggest influence and supporting elements of this story, and they rarely get called out, right? We don't talk about them much at all.
That's fascinating, because
it is important to celebrate.
Completely. And I love the way you brought up the spouses thing, because you can't do the startup. You need that balance. You need the yin and the yang to help you, right, with the rest of your life. So three cheers to the spouses out there. I think that's wonderful. Well, you're saying that you guys, you think about the nitpicking, the next steps, and I think your investors love hearing that. I know for a fact they do. But I just want to say, as someone from the Canadian startup community and someone from the Vancouver startup community, I noticed the party that everyone else was having. There was pride. There was pride, huge celebration. So I just want to personally give you a huge congratulations, and and thank you for making me smile when I got to see it, because I've heard so much about your company over the years, and so much about both of yourselves, and to see a huge win, like a huge win. For the listeners, that's that. Well, tell you what. Let's. I mean, we got to where we are now. Where did it start from? Where did you guys meet? Jason, why don't you explain to me how did you both meet?
I'll give that background. I just wanted to pick up on that one point, the employee level of celebration. I think that was just one of the most compelling aspects of it. So less about a physical party and everybody celebrating there. What you see a lot of from Klue employees is the spillover onto social, about their excitement genuinely about the company, whether it's an SDR talking about, this is my first week at Klue. The culture ended up being exactly like what was promised before I joined the company. The skepticism turned into reality, and they'll share that. But then, you raise a bunch of money. There's a lot of pride in, hey, I picked a good startup to be with that has like exciting growth opportunities with the fuel to get there. So yeah, you saw that spill onto LinkedIn primarily. That tends to be our primary social channel. And it's amazing to see we're up to 150 employees now. And that just, hey, I'm with this company. This is what we did. This is really exciting. I just want to tell the world that. So you're right. The celebration was kind of like a micro social explosion of pride that hit LinkedIn, which I really liked. Thinking about how Sarathy and I met, it was, when you go back to the very humble beginnings, and this is, it's fun to think about the two of us in a room and a whiteboard thinking, well, if we could pull a couple of these things together, we might have a business here. Initially, we weren't even sure how big the business could be or what it could do. We thought maybe it'd just be a bootstrap business, and we'd have a smaller group of folks that we would work with and build kind of a place that we both wanted to show up to every day, build something challenging that we could mentally work on for decades, and something that was with the right people and the right culture. Sarathy and I had spent a lot of time in different cultures of companies, and we wanted to make sure this one was kind of set at the same level. So, the very earliest days, I'd say most of the founder conversation was, what kind of company do we want to build culture-like? How are we going to set that tone? Sarathy mentioned we don't tend to celebrate things ourselves a lot, and recognize that gap and find the people that can actually instigate a little more celebration as an example. But we have a work ethic that it's a very high bar. And so how do we find the people that actually appreciate climbing mountains rather than, the easy path, and that, kind of set the tone. So I would say, how we met was, who was it? Sorry, I think it was actually the current GM of Lyft that Sarathy worked with back in the Sofos days. He had come out of the Sofos world, and I was looking for a co-founder to get started. And this being my fifth kind of related startup, I didn't want to start a company without a strong complementary technical co-founder. And so did a lot of dating. And when Peter introduced Sarathy and I, Sarathy was actually in India caring for his parents. And I literally was going to hop on a plane to fly over to India. We had 200 and something mutual connections. Sarathy co-wrote Perl back in the early days of the web, and my first company was entirely built on CGI Perl scripts. To think, we were down the block from each other but never met. I was like, who is this guy? So really wanted to connect and meet. Had to fight Amazon because he was they were threatening to give him a nice big fat job there. And I'm like, you don't want to work at Amazon. You want to do a startup. And thankfully,
I'm going to interrupt there and say I cringe every time he says I co-wrote Perl. I did some things there. I was a maintainer for a few years of the main Perl releases that came out, and did a bunch of stuff that made it possible to run Perl on Windows. But I wouldn't call it co-writing Perl. But he hypes me every chance he gets.
Gatekeeper, you're part of the Perl DNA. How about that?
If you Google Perl, Sarathy's name will pop up. And at the time, it was Gurusame Sarathy. Had a name change, but that Sarathy's incredibly modest. He was release manager for many years, would show up at conferences and people would line up for autographs. So if that co-wrote might be too strong, but he's a very good looking man, but to show up at conferences and have autograph lineups, Brad Pitt style, like there's something what he did in the Perot community that got that group excited. So, but yeah, fair. I am the hustler. He's the hacker, and that's why it makes a great founder couple.
Well, I love the fact that you focused on the fact that we need to find complementary skills and complementary styles, because that is one of the biggest mistakes I think a lot of the young startups do is they hey, you're my friend, we both hack together, let's do something together, and you're missing a key part of the equation by doing that, and quite possibly going to hurt a friendship too. So I think that's a fantastic origin story. Well,
Jason mentioned us kind of aligning on the culture first, and remember the first thing we kind of said to each other was, I would love to create a place where I would like to come to work every day, right? We were focused on building, and this was probably the first thing we discussed. Wouldn't it be great to create a workplace where both of us would enjoy working every day, instead of dreading it, or it becoming like a tough thing every day to deal with. And I think we've kept that particular focus on making the place great to work in.
That's fantastic. I mean, I remember one of the first, when we founded my company, one of the first things that we had a guy from Seattle say, "Hey, this is a great stage. I'd love to be you guys because you get to define culture." And I didn't really understand that at the time, but boy, after you figure it out pretty quickly. But here's a question for you. You both, actually, because you guys like to interrupt each other. You told me you're going to, so I'm just going to go with both here. What's the balance of the definition of the culture? How much is it executive and how much is it team? Is it like 50-50, 90-10, 100 to 0? I doubt that. Is there a number that you think of when it comes to culture, that who defines what Klue is?
It's part organic.
Go ahead, Carl.
Yeah, it's part organic, part defined by some of the values that seep out from the practices we have put in place. Like, I'll give you some examples. So very early on, we decided that our internal drive, the Google Drive storage that we had would be open by default, right? That we wouldn't try to kind of hide anything. That was a transparency thing that we have lived. As we have kind of grown bigger for compliance reasons or what have you, we have made minor adjustments, but that openness and transparency has stayed with us to this day. And that actually gives it a very open feel. When you come to work at Klue, you probably see a lot more than you would normally see at other companies. We share notes from board meetings freely. Every board meeting we do is like an open book. We talk about what we discussed there and tell people about what we showed in the board deck, for example. And then the second thing I would point to is very early on, we had this meeting that we set up every Friday afternoon called Show, Don't Tell. And that was about showing everybody else, instead of talking, actually showing what happened that week with you, right? Everybody can come to the table and show off something they experienced, whether it's negative, positive, whatever it was. And the intent there was to not speak in words, or because words are subject to interpretation. They go through layers of translation and interpretation. Whereas showing the actual thing you're building, or the thing that happened, or the piece of code you wrote, or something really in front of you, doesn't require any parsing or interpretation. It is what it is, right? And so we kept that meeting. We still have that meeting. We meet every Friday. We, anybody is welcome to kind of show off what they did. And that sort of acceptance of, just let it all hang out and show what you mean, as opposed to saying what you intend, it has been one of the defining features of our culture, I would say.
That's awesome. I mean, these are very, very very simple expressions of culture, in the sense of even something as simple as at the very beginning, hey, we're going to leave that Google Drive open. I mean, most of the young startup people don't even think about that in terms of culture. They think that in terms of, everything translates, and once you start from it, it's hard to, until like you said, when you start getting a little more successful and you have to kind of pull back for certain legal obligations. But I really love those definitions or those descriptions of culture. Well, tell you what, I'm always interested because everyone in Canada is an immigrant at some point. I'm really interested in your personal journey. So you were educated in India and in the States. I saw that you went to Michigan. Was it?
That's
University
right,
of Michigan, a great school. When you came to Canada, well, first off, why did you come to Canada, and what were your expectations for being in Vancouver, like in terms of lifestyle and work?
Yeah, I didn't have any sort of preconceived notions about what Canada would be like. So when I went to the US, I actually got a fellowship to do a PhD in architecture. My undergrad degree was in architecture.
Fantastic.
And I got interested in computer-aided design systems for decision making. While you're designing buildings, there was precious little feedback from CAD software at the time. And there was a lot of avenues for helping, but the state of the art was not to actually provide you some supporting stats about what you're sketching or what you had in mind. So it wasn't like a two-way conversation with the computer. It was more like, oh yeah, let me use it as a drafting tool, right? And so I wanted to fix that, and that was a sort of a pet peeve of mine during my design years studying architecture. And so I came to I connected with a professor at the University of Michigan, and they gave me a fellowship to attend Ann Arbor. I didn't, my parents were not wealthy or anything, so that you wouldn't have been able to do that without a fellowship that paid everything. So I moved to the US, spent about 3 years in the PhD program, and then realized that would commit me to an academic lifestyle. Which, after having been in it, that I didn't really enjoy the thought of staying in an academic for the foreseeable future. And so I had second thoughts about it. That was the same time around which I got involved in the open source movement, which was on the ascendancy at the time. And software that people wrote just for the sheer enjoyment of it was being released out into the open with no expectation of any kind of payback. Right? It was a very laissez-faire, sort of non-economic mindset with open source software at the time. And then in the late 90s, that movement kind of gained steam, and there was an open source conference that was put together by O'Reilly, the book publisher. And I attended that conference and met a bunch of the Perl people that I had worked with day to day. There were maybe around 200 odd people helping maintain Perl, and none of them had met each other, or very few of them had met each other. We only knew each other by the emails we would send to each other. We would judge each other based on the quality of those emails and the
How academic of you.
Yeah. So I decided to kind of stop short with my PhD track, and instead I got a master's in computer science, and then I was looking for what to do further with my involvement with Perl at the time. And there was a company in Vancouver that was trying to get Perl working well on Windows, and they had some funding from Microsoft back then. And so the founder of that company, Active State, reached out to me and said, hey, you keep whatever you're doing, you just keep doing that, but you can come to Vancouver and we'll keep paying you for that. And at the time I had graduated from University of Michigan, and I was looking for, so what's next? Do I want a job, or what should I do? And this seemed perfect because it dovetailed with my passion at the time, working on these languages. And so that's came to. I visited Vancouver, and I loved the weather compared to Michigan, right?
Warm Canada compared to cold United States. I dig that.
Yeah, my tropical bones felt every winter in Michigan was like, oh my goodness, dreading the winter time in Michigan. And when I visited Vancouver, that was in November 1998, I think. I actually saw that winter was not that bad. It rained a little bit, but it was kind of mild compared to Michigan. And then I also loved the fact that Vancouver was so multicultural. It had all kinds of ethnicities and influences, which I enjoyed.
Fantastic.
And openness to nature and all that was an attraction as well for me. And so then I moved in December 1998. I moved, and then I have stayed here ever since.
Well, how long are you with Active State?
I was with Active State for 5 years, and in 2013, Active State was sold to Sofos. So I stayed with Sofos for another 10 years after that.
So I guess that bears into my next question: is what did you do as the chief technologist of Sofos? I guess that was just a marriage that continued then.
Yeah. So one of the things that led to the Sofos acquisition was us building an anti-spam tool. A way to filter out spam from your email for companies and universities. It had an early success with universities, and it was built around open source at the time. Perl and SendMail. SendMail had a framework for embedding a policy engine inside it, which I contributed to as well at the time. And so I essentially embedded Perl interpreters inside SendMail. And it could execute any Perl code you choose to write, and it would. And Perl was really good at text processing, so it was a perfect language for writing heuristics using regular expressions or other kinds of fancy text manipulation. So that became popular. Yeah, that became popular primarily in universities to begin with, and then some big companies like AT&T got wind of it, and then they adopted it, and that kind of led to its success. So it became Pure Message. We called it Pure Message a bit later. And then Sofos was one of the partners we were using for embedding an antivirus engine as well in the email flow, so that at the time there were a lot of spam messages that also would have viral payloads. Like if you click on it, it will take over your machine and stuff like that. So that was that evolution kind of led us closer to Sofos, and Sofos realized that they didn't have a solution for anti-spam, and they acquired the company because of that. And then once I was at Sofos, I continued to be involved in all of the perimeter protection software that we built. We built appliances for filtering the web traffic inside companies, email traffic, and to write policies around what sort of traffic is okay inside a corporate environment, for instance. So that led to other things like UTMs, which are hardware wire speed filtering engines. So we acquired some companies in that space, and we built further perimeter protection software and hardware.
Well, I know the guys at Sofos, or the people at Sofos. I know they're great. Well, there's I think 2 floors above it, or well, I think they have 2 floors in total above us. We see them in the elevators all the time, and
right.
I got to get a little hacky stuff, and the old SendMail stuff, the CGI. I mean, yeah, I remember that stuff back in my university days too. So, thank you for working on that stuff, because that was definitely important. Well, Perl, I mean, if you're an older dog like myself, I mean, we definitely, that was kind of the now they do Python being the easy scripting language. Perl was it back then with what you could do. What made Perl such an interesting scripting language for you?
Well, in the early days, there were hardly any dynamic programming languages that were mainstream. And at the time, I got involved in Perl because I was writing a traffic simulator as part of my graduate assistant duties. I worked on a project to simulate the traffic in the city of Detroit. The Federal Highway Administration in the U.S. gave us some funding to study why traffic networks get bogged down, right? Why do you have traffic jams? And can we improve the situation? Can we find a system level optimum for traffic flow in the city of Detroit by providing route guidance to vehicles in the city? And so this was in the early days. There weren't the handheld GPS devices, right, in the 90s. they were trying to study if they should put in place a system from Siemens, which was more like beacons, traffic beacons that would send signals to cars saying, instructing them to take the optimal route, right? And so the question was, if you fed information to all the cars in the system, would you end up with a system optimum, or would it not work? Would you end up with a local optimum instead? So in traffic theory, there is no answer, right? It's a chaotic system. And so you had to simulate with given set of inputs to find what the behaviors would be. So we would inject the system with different kinds of types of vehicles and so forth. But for doing that, there was no way to dynamically specify what the vehicle behavior should be. And I was looking for a programming language that was easy to use for traffic engineers to specify what all the parameters are for a vehicle behavior. And so that's what led me to Perl, because it felt like a language that I could embed in this big real-time simulator. And then I kept finding bugs in Perl, and I started fixing them one by one. And then that led me to the community that was also doing this stuff. And then it took me over full time.
It took you over. And that's where you became, and I love this, I have to quote this, you became the hacker at large at the Programming Republic of Perl.
That's right. Yeah, the Perl community had very sort of compelling cultural cultural stories, and one of them was that it's a country, right? It's a programming republic.
That's awesome. That's
we
awesome.
We ourselves with all kinds of
Oh, well, I probably would have scripted.
I know Jason is dying to talk, so maybe I should leave a gap.
No, you know what? We got Jason right now. I mean, we're about to move over there, and then we're going to bring her all back.
He did tell me that he coded in Perl in the early days, so
very nice.
He's going to tell you that story probably.
Do you remember the first script you did? The first thing you wrote? And don't say hello world.
I'm just waking up right now. Is Sarathy finished speaking? I'm where are we here? Yeah, it's sorry that I have a wonderful relationship when it comes to that. Like there's I am not a coder. No, the best I did was create a clown in Visual Basic back in on an Apple IIe and had it printed on a dot matrix computer, and I think I won the least likely to be a programmer for a living award at Lakefield Computer Camp. That's my claim to fame on that. But it is actually, funny enough, as I try and get my two daughters into coding, probably my biggest regret is not going down that path. I did solder at UBC and graduated with a marketing degree and embarrassed my family by starting a company right out of university.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you about. So is that the Columbus Group, Communication Inc.?
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about that.
So this is going way back, like Netscape era. There's early days of the web where two friends and I started a company effectively building websites, and we just tried to do it in a kind of a program, not even a programmatic way, more of a custom way, like a web planning process that would lead to kind of an outcome where back in the day it was like, do you want package A, B, or C from your internet service provider? And so it was a slight differentiator that we brought in. And we ended up building that company from, the three of us university. We can't get our jobs, so we'll start our own company mindset.
Awesome.
$5,000 in a pot. And that ended up being a 100-person company that got acquired by TELUS in just before kind of the first .com era came to an end. And so it was a good outcome. And when you do that, straight out of university, you've got this mindset of, building business is easy somehow, simple, right? Because you get lucky and you think it's you, and then you realize that there's a lot of factors that come into play. And I think the best entrepreneurs out there would admit there's a lot of grit and persistence and grind that you have to do, but you need a big healthy dose of market luck that's going to help you with the tailwinds.
I hear you. Well, question. I mean, you went to start what? Because there's such a stitched line in time where people like my age, your age, we started with doing websites. Like we got out of university, wasn't sure what to do. We started by websites. It got us into the industry. What year were you in solder?
So I came out of solder in '94.
Okay, so we're pretty much the same then. I was 97, 98. But UBC Ski Club, I was bringing it up. You had maybe did a tour.
There you go.
I used to be the president of that group.
Well, if you're 98, Chris, that's why you look younger and healthier than I do. So that's the difference.
I extended it a lot. Let's just say that undergrad was basically a PhD. Well, let's go to the next chapter then, because I mean, you know what? Felicitation for even, for your first exit, 100 people. I mean, that's incredible. That's incredible, and it really speaks to leadership and vision and a whole lot of luck. It's a common theme which I'll have to agree with. But then you went down to SFO, right, in San Francisco with Baizu.com. Was that the next chapter? Can you tell me what's that like and how different that is to be doing it in the Valley instead of in Canada?
Yeah, it was very different because that was a startup with 2 HBS grads, and so they had the whole Harvard mafia to be able to leverage to get into,
that's nice,
the right types of CEO, offices and venture capitalists. And so, where the first company was services, $5,000 in a pop, buy some Macs and go, hang a shingle and hustle.
Mm-hmm.
This one was, think of it like Groupon before the social graph. So timing wise, too early, learned a big lesson around looking for trends and dovetailing those trends to not be too far ahead or too far behind it. But that one was an interesting one because, SF was going off. Everyone was, a .com everything. And just at the tail end of that, we were trying to raise basically $20 million on the back of a PowerPoint deck. And it seemed like that's what you're supposed to do.
Mm-hmm,
and odd for me as the bootstrapped, grindy entrepreneur to be exposed to that world. But hey, I didn't go to Harvard, so let's follow these guys, and they seem to know better. And so it was interesting to see the difference in approach from how an MBA thinker would go about building a business. Unbelievably smart people, but the difference between, is there a loose brick in that wall entrepreneur, and I'm going to analyze everything and come to a probabilistic outcome and make a decision on that, versus ignoring the odds was quite clear to me. In fact, in my next thing, I worked at Electronic Arts, or a guy named Don Matrick, who we'd won some Entrepreneur of the Year awards through our first business, and we won the kind of, I'll call it the kid category, the emerging one, and he won for like the real technology one. I remember going up to him and just saying, like, look, we graduated, we started this company, and I really don't know what I'm doing. I could use a mentor, and kind of developed a relationship. And so when Columbus sold, I was going to go work for him, and then did this Baizu thing with the HBS grads. I remember talking to him about doing it instead of EA, and he's like, "Oh, I'm so disappointed in you." I'm like, what do you mean? I'm so disappointed that you would go not start up a company, but that you would do it with a couple MBAs. And I'm like, what are you talking about, right? And he literally said, like, look, the difference of a successful entrepreneur early. You have a mindset of you've done it, you pattern match, you think you can do it again naively. And it's a big thruster engine that you need to get your business off the ground, to mentally think you can just do it and find a way. Whereas, the MBA world teaches you how to analyze and be a little more cautious on things, and again, probabilistic outcomes. So that disappointment, ended up maybe revealing itself. Not it was more the timing of that business idea. And so he ended up bringing me in to look at mobile gaming at EA, and so completely different world for me, going from, is that a door? Can I use that door and put IKEA legs on it, flip it over, and is there a box we can sit on, to 3 air chairs and a couch in my office, and like IT people that would set everything up for me, and thousands of people, and a VP title that seemed to matter, and working for the president of Worldwide Studios. And it was just this completely different, for like a real income too. Like there's a paycheck, which was like, we paid ourselves nothing in our first company. And so, very different worlds. Realized that I was a fish out of water there, and didn't want to stay too long. Also, it was very unique of how people thought about it. There's a lot of career concern for individuals versus let's put the company first. There was no let's do this all together. It was, yeah, I'll say that, but really, like, you're not going to screw me, are you? Because I need to climb this ladder. And it was that's not a shot at EA. That's just a general shot at, when you get bigger, there's politics, right?
Yeah.
Not for me. So left. Was big into the ultimate Frisbee world, and got into a company that a friend of mine from Solder started, called Gaia. And I was an early snowboarder, so I had this conviction that if you could be the brand that's emblematic of the sport, then you can rise as the sport rises. And I was convinced that everybody in the world was going to play Ultimate. Ultimate was going to take over the world. And so we built a company effectively like an Umbro, soccer, and cleats, and bags, and custom jerseys. And it got to a couple $1 million, but it was never going to take off. Real inventory, like for those of us in tech that are listening to this, like we're lucky.
Hard to
like
scale.
When you get real inventory, men's and women's cuts, 15 different colors, plus extra small all the way to XL. How many do you order of each? Where do you store it? In the US and Canada? Or like it's the logistics associated with that, and getting product delivered on time, quality suppliers, just a different world. So bailed out of that, and then started to work at, then actually, truthfully, I looked around and said, I don't want to start another company. I want to go work for somebody who's been there, done that. And that's when I found Vision Critical, and Angus Reid and his son Andrew were kind of getting that thing off the ground. There's about 8 folks. I know Andrew's been on your show, good friend.
Great show with Andrew, I got to say. He really, I learned a lot from him. He was fantastic.
He's unbelievable. He's a force of nature. He was impressive from day one when I met him. And his father obviously had a great reputation, sold his company for $100 million. So I thought, let's get on board there. It was like 8 people at the time, and let's see if I could help that. And joining it, I really thought of it as my own company. As an entrepreneur very much would. And that's a beneficial thing, and it's also maybe a negative, is you expect certain things, not financially, but just control over your vision, and it's not your company. And so, but it was a good gig there. That grew over 7 years to 500 people, and Vision Critical is now called Alida, and it was certainly a good Canadian success story. But when I look at it relative to what maybe we could have become, when our biggest competitor is now public for $25 billion, Qualtrics, and we were equal to them at a certain point in time, it's frustrating to think that we look at a couple $100 million valuation as a success, which it would be, right? And yet there's a $25 billion outcome that was in your grasp. And so I think that context certainly helped sharpen my focus into Klue, and say, like, if there is a big opportunity, that's where you want to try and scale up and win it and be the category leader, instead of, in our case, being very conservative on our financial raises in Vision Critical. This time, actually, maybe raise the capital to kind of really accelerate yourself ahead of the competition and be that category leader. So there's a full story.
Can I ask a question about that? Because Vision Critical is one of those companies that really intrigues me, because in the States you have the PayPal mafia, but there's so many great companies that come out of the people from Vision Critical, like Chris from Dooley and all this. What is it that what's the DNA that makes people? Why do so many innovators come out of Vision Critical, which at the end of the day wasn't, the technology was relatively straightforward, but why do so many great innovators come out of there, do you think?
So it's a great question. I think there's, Mark Bergen now runs all global revenue for Shopify, and he and Chris were both on the sales team at Vision Critical. I think there's a magic moment in any company's history where you have the wind at your back, the sales are full, and you're cranking, and the culture feels right. The market feels like it's yours for the taking. There's still lots of grinding, but there's this magic feeling of possibility. And I think everybody was infected by that at the early days of Vision Critical, and that sense of what we can do. I think we found that balance of American Canadian, I'll call it, just enough ego to sit at a table and be confident with other people that are highly confident people, but at the same time have the humility of a Canadian that says we still don't know, and there's lots we should learn and listen for. And so I think that was that's part of what we tried to build at Vision Critical culturally. And again, I think there's a lot of people there that we had a lot of the right motions in place. We certainly had, like, Chris and Mark and I and Andrew were all more on the SaaS product side and go-to-market side of that business. And actually, Chris Whitmore and Tamara, ex Vision Critical, both work at Klue now. And Chris was the CTO, and he's now our VP Eng. And Tamara was running product, and now she runs product at Klue. And so I think a lot of people had a taste of what could be and what was a great success, but it feels like we could maybe tweak that model a little more and get to the next one. So I think it was really just what everybody tries to do: attract good people, give them room to move, build a culture that elevates them, and see how far you could take it.
That's a great answer. I really, 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 really like that. Well, Jim, I mean, and then, you guys met, you created an amazing company. You've sold it for $200 billion. Oh, maybe I jumped ahead of there, but I'm creating a storyline for you for where you're going to go. And I'll be applauding you along the whole way.
Iconic public company that can last forever.
There you go. And then you take all the rest of the Vancouver along with you, and I'm looking forward to riding that tail of that dragon. Well, again, the theme of Afternoon Tea is to talk about the amazing journey that both of you had in order to expedite the next generation of Canadian founders. So I have two questions I always ask. And Sarathy, I'm going to start with you, if you please. But can you share one piece of advice to help younger Canadian founders? One thing that you've learned along the journey.
I think the primary factor for success is probably finding a great partner. To me, I think what has led to this is, my wife, Mida, great life partner, and my friend Jason, who's a great business partner. And in so many ways, we kind of support each other. It's like we complement each other, and yet we are similar in other respects. So that mix of complementary skills and attitudes always helps, because business life has its ebbs and flows, right? Some days you're bullish, some days you're down and you're not bullish, and you need the other person to kind of lift you up. And throughout the 7 years that we worked on this thing together, I can't think of any one day where we didn't support each other in some way, some small way. So I think that's a big success factor. But the advice I would give any budding entrepreneur is to always be hopeful, right? No matter how bad things get, or no matter how hopeless things are, you've got to find a way to create the hope within you. And you have to find the bright side of whatever it is, wherever you are, and motivate you from with hope rather than push you with despair, like you're going to if you didn't do it you would fail. It's not the right way to motivate yourself. Instead, you could motivate yourself with positive visions of how you would move forward from wherever you are.
Find the hope within you. That's a T-shirt I would love to get. Like I think that's amazing advice. And the partners, I couldn't agree more. You have to love and trust them, because just like you mentioned about how your wife is part of the journey. Well, you know what? Your business partner is just like your wife. So I understand that. Well, let me take it to you, Jason. Same question then. One piece of advice that you'd give to the young Canadian startup founder.
It's so hard to think of one, right? So there's so many on that. I will emphasize the trust side when you think about your founding partner. Trust is absolutely critical, in addition to the obvious complementary skill sets. I think there's a word that is overused, interpreted by many differently, and it is culture, and it is. But if I could put my view on it, I think it's about the talent density and the talent mindset that you bring in early, and how much room you give them to move, and where the guardrails are, right? So you're not going to just say it's free and open. You are going to set a bit of the tone of the work ethic, the approach, disarming any ego and getting to the root issue of whatever problem you need to solve, without the egos and without the personal agendas. I think that's a tone that the founders can set. So when I think of culture, I think it's about finding the people that want to elevate and put that elevation first. I don't think of it as supportive in this kumbaya kind of thing. It's not like, it is not a soft thing. It is how do you find the people that actually enjoy a bit of the pain, enjoy the climb, enjoy the, there's a nice view there, but what's up on that next level? Like maybe we go around that next corner. And I think certainly at the earliest stages of your startup, you need people that are mountain climbers. You need the people that want to elevate and are not going to have like the whinging or the whining on the way up that they've got blisters and they're a victim of this. They're just going to find a way to do it and get through it. And if somebody is falling down, then they put them on their back. And when they fall down, that person puts them on their back. And that's that culture that I'm talking about. It's an elevated, supportive, transparent vulnerability that says, we're getting to the damn top of the mountain. Do you want on or not? It ain't a vacation. It's not for everyone. But if you're coming on board for this Everest trip, then let's do it right.
Let's do it right. That's awesome. Support. And you know what? Maybe you're not going to bitch about the blisters, but your partner and your coworkers better notice you have them so they can pick up the slack should you need to. So I think that's fantastic. I love these mountain visions that we're constantly going back to. I hope you guys climb lots of mountains, and I hope you also recognize where the top of that mountain is at some point, because that is somewhere to stand up, and sing from high praise. Well, kumbaya. If that's where you're going to go. But well, you know what? I'll go back to you, Jason, then. Can you share with me, please, the name of a Canadian entrepreneurial star or founder that you personally look up to?
Yeah, this is an interesting question. There's so many entrepreneurs I look up to, and there's a whole bunch of them on my cap table that were angel investors,
Even better.
Yeah, like Ryan Holmes and Hootsuite, was a fantastic supporter of us early. Steve Mutford, that was Sofos and others. But I'm going to pick Mike Serbinas, and he runs a company called League out of Toronto. And there's a specific thing that I really appreciated about Mike. He's an incredibly successful entrepreneur and is building League into a multi-billion-dollar likely public outcome. It's going to be a fantastic Canadian-run business. There was a moment in time when he said, "Look, there's in every startup's history and their trajectory and their journey, you got to decide if you want to be the fly or the elephant. Are you the fly or the elephant?" And I didn't fully grasp it at that time. But when we are staring down the barrel of, do we want to raise another round that's going to be a high valuation with a big press stack that we're going to need to clear if we sell our company or go public or anything, you kind of have to take this deep breath of you're going for it, like going for it. That's the elephant moment. The fly moment is you can build a very successful business, keep it tight and bootstrap or small amounts of capital inputs and look for an amazingly rewarding exit entrepreneurially. And there's plenty of flies out there. There's a handful of elephants out there. And and so I really respected Mike when he shared that of, are you the fly or the elephant? And you got to decide at one point what you want to be. And and it's hard when there's two people in a room and a whiteboard to say, I want to be the elephant. You are the fly at that point, but you have to be thinking about how big you want to take the thing.
You're learning to become the elephant. There you go. And that's great advice. In League, I mean, honestly, that's a great company, and hard not to appreciate that. Sarathy, tell me a Canadian entrepreneur or founder, or you know what, even if you want to go back to the Indian roots, an Indian founder, maybe that'll be of interest too, that you really look up to.
Actually, there are a lot of entrepreneurs that I admire, but I'm going to go with the Technologist.
Okay, good.
Because technology evolution requires a lot of guts and all the same entrepreneurship mindset. In order to break through and do something new, you got to have the courage and the balance between ambition and contentment that it takes to achieve things, right? So I'm going to pick two Canadian technologists.
Okay.
The early one that I was inspired by was Rob Pike. Rob Pike is probably most recently well known as one of the authors of the Go language. He has been involved in the Unix development for many years. He was at Bell Labs in the 60s and built a lot of the later evolution of what Unix became, Plan 9 and other things. A lot of the foundational things in the Go language were a result of Rob kind of talking about them and inspiring those directions. So that Rob was an early influence in my, the things I learned and what I focused on. And then more recently, a big influence is Jeffrey Hinton, the big three, one of the big three AI pioneers who's Canadian. He's an academic, but he was instrumental in making huge strides in machine learning, in deep learning.
Completely.
So that's what I'm going to go with.
And overlooked for so many years, and then just said, I think there's something in this, and then the world discovers him, and
he had it right.
Rightly elevates him.
He had it right, and I'm really proud to say, as a good Canadian, that one of our meeting rooms is named after him. So, which is really important. Well, gents, I mean, I'm going to honestly say, if I look up to anyone, both of you is, a direction I want to go. I mean, I'm thinking elephant now, though. I'm just a fly in here chatting. So, both, I just want to say thank you. From the Canadian perspective, thank you for sharing, your valuable time with us, for sharing your lessons, and also thank you for bringing capital into the country and showing a model that you don't have to go down to the States. You can do it from here, and you can be successful doing it. And with every story of success that comes here and raises great deals of capital, Americans and Europeans and all that take notice and think, what other wonderful pearls can we find? So, and we're taking back the Pearl PERL instead of PEARL, but that's our language thing in here. But honestly, gents, thank you so much, and congratulations. And I hope that you do get to celebrate with your team and with your families and with each other the journey that you're on and still on as you climb that mountain. So cheers and best of luck on the next stages.
Thank you. Thanks, Chris.